This is Twisted Passages with award-winning author Marie Sutro. Now, let's take a deep dive into the dark world of psychological thrillers and meet the authors who created them.
Hello, and welcome to Twisted Passages. I'm your host, Marie Sutro, and today we'll be talking to international best-selling author Anders Motte about his new release, The Mountain King. Welcome, Anders.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I cannot wait to dive into this novel. It was absolutely amazing. You had me hooked from the very beginning. Before I start getting crazy and peppering you with questions, could you just give our audience an overview of what The Mountain King is about?
Yeah, so the Mountain King is sort of a mix between thriller and police procedural, but with a bit of an unusual twist. So these are not the best police officers in the world. Actually, they're more like the worst, and they're based in a basement area in the police headquarters in Malmö, where they're doing nothing, just being waiting for retirement, really. And Leo Asker, who is the main protagonist, she's promoted. She's moved from a position at the homicide division to be the head of this department of. It's called the resource department, but really there are no resources whatsoever there. And inside the police, they're known as the Department of Lost Souls, orphan cases and lost souls. So you take this high-performing Leo Asker to be the boss of this team, which he really doesn't want to be, and they sort of stumble upon a very hot case that they have to work, even though they have a lot of differences. Wonderful. Would that be an accurate description? Yeah, and of course there's a serial killer. There's a very, 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 very evil serial killer hiding inside a mountain and watching everything and having a sort of a unique way of communicating his deeds to the public and to the police.
Yes, that killer is amazing. And you introduce us. One of the things I thought was so much fun was you gave us multiple character points of view. And our starting character point of view is from the villain. And you just gave us a little snippet of it. But it was enough. I mean, it was one of the best hooks I've ever read. The very last line in particular. In fact, I had read it and I had to go find my husband and I had to read it to him and say, listen to that. Is that just amazing or what? I don't want to ruin it for the audience because I want them to have just as much fun as I did when I read it. But Leo Asker, she's an amazing, strong woman. Can you tell us a little about what inspired that character?
Actually, she sort of came up when I first I planned, after long research, the Department of Lost Souls, and they actually come from my own experience as a police officer. In the 90s, I worked as a young rookie cop in Stockholm, and we worked in an office that's very similar to the one in the book, actually. And we worked in a basement around this little courtyard, and we were young, and we just all did all these. We took any case, whatever it was, like breaking and entering. Yeah, I'll take that. So, drunk driving. Yes, excellent. And at the end of the hallway we were working in, there were 3 closed doors that we thought were like empty offices. And one day, one of my colleagues, it was his birthday, so he brought like birthday cake in. And magically, these 3 doors swung open, and 3 gentlemen in their 60s sort of looked out. They were slightly red-eyed and mint breathing, kind of smelling, and they sort of nodded politely to everyone, took a piece of cake, and then disappeared into their offices, and never to be seen again, ever. And we were like, who were they, and what were they working on, and why are they here? And we couldn't understand anything. So I've kept this idea of these, people in big departments like the police or in the government in general. It's quite difficult being fired, right? You have to be very bad before they fire you. So typically what they do is they put you somewhere, out of harm's way or out of the public's eye or something like that. So I had this idea of these low performers. And when I then, of course, tried to create some dynamic in the story, I needed a high performer. I needed someone who was their complete opposite, and that's sort of how Leo Asker came to be. So she's a high performer. She's very, very quick, efficient. She has very little patience with those who aren't as quick and dedicated and efficient as she is. And she has a little bit of problem with her people skills because she is very impatient. And that's sort of what loses her original job working for like the homicide division with a high profile kidnapping as she is in the beginning of the book, and being then promoted, demoted to the Department of Lost Soul. And so I really wanted someone to being a high performer. I'm a high performer myself. My wife's a high performer. We can be annoying. Yeah. So I really wanted someone who was that, to create that dynamic against the low performers. She's used to ordering people to do stuff, and at the Department of Lost Souls, no one listens to orders. So she has to find other ways to motivate them or get them to help her. So that's sort of how she came to be. And then of course, if you have a detective, they have to have a trouble background. That's basic. If you're writing a police procedure, you have to have a detective with a trouble background. And I try to make her not just trouble, but it's sort of, so she has a dual feelings, mixed feelings about her background. She's grown up with a father who is a very intelligent engineer who sort of turned into a prepper, one of those doomsday preppers that lives in the countryside, and he sort of more or less tortured her through her childhood, preparing her for this doomsday that never arrived. And she hates him, but he also taught her some things that are very useful in her career. So she has this dual, really mixed feelings about her upbringing. Some parts of it were really, really bad, but also she learned some things that she's constantly using in her profession. So I wanted to try and create that duality within her. So, well, that's more or less how I created Leo.
Well, I think you did a fantastic job because, as you said, that dichotomy, that what caused her this intense trauma that she's still grappling with, is also what creates her superpowers, if you will.
Yes.
A lot of what her father does to her, and this is something I definitely wanted to dive into with you in so many ways, because, like I said, she's a fascinating and complex character, and everything about her just drives every aspect of the plot, because we want to see her in every scene. We want to see how she's reacting, responding, what she's doing. One of the things that her father in certain ways tries to take from her is hope. And I found it fascinating that you came at the concept of hope from so many different angles. You looked at how her father is kind of taking hope from her with this doomsday. This is the end of the world. This is a foregone conclusion. This is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you looked at it in her own life. Then you took her from her job that she had earned her position in, and you took away her hope there because you put her in the Department of Lost Souls, right?
Yes.
And then you have a villain who is very well versed and very intuitive about how to take hope away and what the implications are once you've taken hope away. What was it about hope that made you come at it from so many places? And what is it that you think, what role does hope serve for us as human beings?
I came at it from the aspect that I think taking away hope from someone is more or less the worst thing you can really do to them, right? So it's in some aspects really even worse than taking someone's life, because you're still alive, but you have no hope. You have no hope for the future or for anything, right? Which is a terrible, terrible place to be at. And it's also when you're telling a story, it's a great driver, because of course she finds hope. That's why Martin Hill is there, her childhood friend who has sort of represented hope to her, both as a child, who sort of kept her sane and kept her fighting her father all through her upbringing, and he then of course he reappears now in the present day story, and again presenting her with some hope. So it's a very strong storytelling element as well. If you take someone's hope away and then you just give them a little glimmer of hope again, and they cling on to it, and then maybe if you're mean enough, you take it away again. And I did the same thing to the character Smilla, who's also in the book, who's actually captured, right? So she also has this sliver of hope, and is it there, is it not? So it's a very strong driver to work with. Not just fear is one thing, but hope and having it taken away is a very strong driver. Storytelling mechanism to work with, and that's why I enjoyed working it. Really, it interests me. That's probably the short answer to yeah.
Well, I loved the exploration that you took us all through from those various points of view and those various sensibilities. And I think, you brought up Martin. He's such a great example because he's one of these people who's very evolved in certain ways. He still has his own struggles. But the reason I say he's evolved is because he seems to be the one person who calls out hope for what it is and understands what happens when you take hope away. And sometimes taking hope away is as simple as leaving someone's life in whatever form that comes in. One of the other things I wanted to touch on that's a recurring theme, plays out in a variety of ways, not just through Asker's profession, but through the relationships that she's involved in. And again, you do a beautiful job of mirroring the challenges for your protagonist with the strengths of your antagonist. And that's the concept of control. A lot of people are fighting for power and control in this story. Did that come up? Was that something that was rooted in your experience as a police officer, or was it something that you encountered a lot in perpetrators of crimes? How did that become such a grappling point for you in this novel?
That's a good question, but I think a lot of crimes are actually about control. A huge number of crimes are actually more that than of violence. Violence is a mean to gain control. Or threats or whatever it is, and sometimes crimes are also caused by the fear of losing control, especially when it comes to domestic violence, men against women typically, right? So that's it's an interesting driver as well, and it's also sort of the opposite of hope, right? So if you want to have total control over someone, well, you take away their hope. So they tie into each other. So that's if you're working with hope, you have to work with control as well, and it's something. If you describe in this case, the serial killer, the Mountain King, who's all about control, right? He can't even release a butterfly that he's caught because he has to keep it. He cannot even relinquish that little amount of control. He still has to keep it, right? So it's sort of it's both a strength and a weakness in some sort, but because what way made him into that way? Why does he feel the need to control everything in his environment? So that's also why I think it's interesting to work with, because it is a weakness. People who strive for control actually have it's a weakness they have, right? So, and if they don't have control, they're totally lost, and they do very, very stupid things sometimes to gain it, or think they can achieve control by doing the wrong things. So it's another one of those feelings that I just like to explore in the books. And funnily enough, when writing the book, the parts that were way easiest to write were the serial killer and the Mountain King. That was no problem. I didn't even have to think. I could just, I can certainly feel the way he was feeling and describe the world from his eyes, which is sort of alarming, but still very interesting. So yeah.
Well, it was it's really insightful when you say that it is a weakness, because so many people, you see that so often, where their need for control really paints them into a tiny corner in life, because everything becomes so narrow focused, that it all kind of collapses in on itself to just this one need. And, it is illusory because you
can't achieve it.
You cannot achieve it. So yeah, that was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
One of the fascinating things I also wanted to question you about was the opening scene of the story. We have two characters who are searching for something. And I wanted to ask, is cave rain real?
I think that I gave it the name cave rain, but if you go into caves or into tunnels that has that environment that I described with a very very high humidity and the rising of the air through like a ventilation or a shaft or something like that, then you can get the air to be so saturated with humidity that it actually reflects the light. So I have a friend who's a very very avid urban explorer, and he explained this to me. And he showed me pictures of it, and it looks very cool. You can almost see the raindrops. So, and I just gave it the romantic name Cave Rain. I don't think you can find it on Google, but the phenomenon itself is actually achievable.
Well, again, so your writing is so atmospheric, and the concept of cave rain, and it kind of repeats as a theme in the book, or as a concept that folks are interested in. It was so atmospheric, and it kind of gave you that little sense of almost Tolkien-esque fantasy element to it that really just put it over the top in the reader's mind.
Wow, never thought about that. I'm a big Tolkien fan, so yeah.
Oh,
Wow,
okay.
thank you.
You are very welcome. Because that's just kind of where my mind went. I started thinking, oh my gosh, trolls and dwarves and all the like.
I flirted a lot with Nordic mythology, like Tolkien did. He took lots of the things he took were actually out of either Nordic mythology or Nordic history. So and trolls, of course, it's a big part of our mythology. The Mountain King, of course, he's the king troll, deep in the mountain. The concept of changelings, which is very very rooted in Swedish mythology, right? So you have to be aware of the changeling with the trolls show up and exchange their child for one of yours, and that's so I really enjoyed sort of leaning into that. I'm Swedish, so I mean we still have that feeling of stay out of the woods, the trolls.
Well, I even loved there's a kind of a seer, a medium character in the story, and the way you described her home, that she's got, I believe there were paintings, right, that were inspired by mythology and mythological characters.
Yep. And she has a dream catcher outside, and
Yeah.
and she wants to call the police every week to tell them all of her insights. 99 of them are completely wrong. It has nothing to do with anything, but maybe there's something there, right? So which is, I enjoyed writing her as well. It was a lot of fun writing about her, and also Asker, who's very very methodical. And and she has to go and see this psychic and listen to her, and she's like, why am I doing this? And then there's a little grain of truth in there somewhere, right?
Yeah, those two characters interacting was so much fun, and it was interesting to see exactly how, because it's kind of her first big test in this new department with this level of important cases, right?
Yeah. To explain to the listeners, it's actually this psychic. She calls the police 100 times a day. So instead of having her sort of close down the whole switchboard, they've just decided that someone has to visit her once a week and take a report of all her insights. So what the spirit world have said about crime this week, right? And Asker sort of picks that, or she's given this task to go and listen to this lady instead of having her and harass the police department. She has to go there and drink coffee and listen to her, which is also a very fun scene to write.
It was a very fun scene to read, and really getting that sense from where she was and what she was doing to where she found herself, and that concept of hope, when I'm sure for the job she had been doing, to have to go into something like that, it's really a way to destroy all hope. It was a great scene. You mentioned, I think, that you have a friend that is an urban explorer. Could you explain just a quick overview of what urban exploration is?
Yeah, it's something that sounds really complicating, right? But it's not at all. It's really that curiosity you had when you were like 11. I lived in a small village, and of course we have a haunted house. Every small village has a haunted house, right? And you have to when you're 11 go there at night just to get in and try to see, is it haunted? And typically it's not, right? Surprisingly enough, but you have to go there. It's that curiosity, to find out what's on the other side of the door, on the other side of the wall, what's down there in the darkness in the basement. that kind of curiosity, if you just keep that as an adult, most of us don't, but if you keep that as an adult and you still want to go to these abandoned places, old warehouses, old closed down hospitals or houses or whatever, then you're an urban explorer, right? So that's what you do when you take a lot of pictures. You're only allowed to take pictures and leave footprints. That's it. That's the rule. So no graffiti, no breaking and entering, nothing like that. And there's actually quite a lot of social media accounts you can follow that posts beautiful pictures of these buildings that are abandoned in various stages. Some of them are scary and some of them are just beautiful. So and that's urban exploration. And my friend Kalle, he's in his 60s. And he's the most curious person I've ever met in my life, still in his 60s. And if he sees an old building, he just has to go in there. He has to find out what it looks like on the inside. And he can do that, for his dream holiday is bicycling around former Eastern Germany and finding old military bases. That's its dream holiday. It's not mine, but it's his. and he took me to some of these places, and he showed me, taught me a lot about urban exploration. And we went down this old factory. It was sort of also like a mine, almost like a, and we went way down in the dark there. And he said, Anders, listen. I said, what? Can you hear it? And I said, what are you talking about? And then I started thinking, I don't know him that well. My phone is not working. What's he talking about here? So, and he said, can you hear a ticking sound? I said, no, I'm sorry, I can't hear it. So what's it supposed to be? He said, oh, it's my heart. He said, sometimes if it's really, really quiet, you can hear my heart. And he tells me it's a mechanical valve to his heart that makes a very clicking sound. And if the acoustics are just right, you can actually hear the clicking. And we went back, and I went home, and I could not sleep at night. I was just lying awake thinking of the heart valve that makes a sound, almost like Captain Hook in Peter Pan, right? And I have to call him the next morning. He's like, Kalle, can I please use the mechanical artificial valve in the book? And he said, yes, but on one condition. Yeah, I said, whatever. And he said, well, it cannot be the killer. So that's fine. Yep, I accept the conditions. And so that's why Martin Hill in the book, he has a mechanical valve, which can turn out to be quite dangerous if you're being hunted by a serial killer in the dark, and he can actually hear your heartbeat. So it was one of those things that I could never have planned it. It just showed up when I was doing research. So
I am so glad you brought that up, because I have been wondering and wondering and wondering, is that true? Can that happen? And the character that you associate with it, I felt for that character so intensely, because I thought, wow, what would you ever get sleep? But I guess it just becomes background noise at some point.
Exactly. Your brain learns to filter that ticking sound out. Kalle told me it took me about a week, he said, and then I don't hear it anymore. So he doesn't. But if I put my ear to his chest, I can hear it, right? So it's yeah. So it opens, and it's when it's opening and closing, you can hear that ticking sound.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And also you have to eat medicine, like blood thinning medicine, not to clog up the valve. And that's also makes it dangerous if you're in an environment you're not supposed to bleed, right? If you're eating blood thinners. So that's not good for you to be injured, which also makes it a good thing to bring into a dramatic story, right?
It does, especially one with a serial killer.
Yes. These books more or less write themselves, right?
It's just all those levels of suspense building one on top of the other. And from the moment you're so very smart about the way that you do that, the little kernels that you leave us as we're reading the story and getting vested in the characters and starting to learn the plot. The whole time you were seeding all brilliant things like that obviously come into these incredible, they really explode and bloom for us as the story goes on. And so well done in all of those regards. What for you, what was some of the characters deal with regret, a variety of different types of regret. The one character who doesn't seem to is the serial killer. What does that kind of say about criminals sometimes, that they don't have that burden of regret? Is that a good thing in your experience, or a bad thing?
I always find it interesting when you see these when they do like surveys of 85% of all CEOs are psychopaths or something like that, which is maybe not true, but it's interesting, because regret is one of those feelings that you should have it, but sometimes it could really be blocking you as well, right? It could be stopping progress if you're constantly worried about regretting your decisions. Well, then you don't make any decisions. That's the way of never regretting anything. Don't make any decisions, right? So I found it very interesting to write about a character who had zero regrets. Because we all have, and I'm in my 50s. My regrets are beginning to build up, right? The older you get, the more you have, of course, right? So it was interesting to write about someone because he's all about control, and he doesn't really regret anything in his life as long as he can, maintain and gain and maintain control. So it's one of those. Regret is also a weakness, right? Too much, you should have it to be human, of course, right? And you should have it to avoid obvious mistakes and not repeating errors. On the other hand, if regrets takes over and becomes too much, then you don't do anything. You become like paralyzed, and it sort of consumes your entire day just thinking about the things you should have done and the way things could have been, right? So and it's one of those things. Also, again, an opposite to control, right? Because it's one of those things you cannot control. You cannot control the past. That you can, in some variations of the future, you may be able to control, but the past, that's all gone, right? So it's another one of those feelings that I like diving into as well. And they have their different regrets as well. The things they wish they would have done differently. Some are more practical and some are like more emotional. And it's also another good feeling to work with, really.
And, I tend to I personally write darker stuff. I tend to read darker stuff, not all the time, but it tends to be my main draw. And one of the things that I absolutely loved that you did so well in this book was you gave us a little romance, and you did it so well. It wasn't sappy. It wasn't, it was literally stuff that you would savor in a story or in life. Where did that come from?
My wife. That's a short answer. No, she actually said, well, you've written now this was my 12th or 13th book. And she said, well, you haven't had much romance in your books. So why? And I said, well, because it's tricky. It's difficult to write about, and making it too sappy, like you said, or it's and the readers are very sensitive to it. You have to be very careful. One of the most difficult things to write about is like a sex scene. 99% of them are, oh, all right, oh,
very cringy.
Yes, cringy, exactly. So it's one of those. I was a little bit too scared to go near that area, and then finally said, well, you have to have some romance here. There has to be some romance in the book. So I this is my first little careful attempt. So that's why it's very careful. I have a whole series to evolve that part of my writing, but I try to explore as much as I can of the thriller genre, but I've been shying away from romance a little bit. So I'm happy I didn't do that now, because it is fun to write about as well, even though it's extreme. It's way more difficult to write about than about a serial killer. Serial killer, easy. Romance, difficult.
I agree with you, and it is something that can get to sappy or get to cringy really quick, or just get to overly predictable, and make you disaffected, when it comes to the main character, because there's a piece that you just didn't like, or, were turned away from. So thank you for doing that, because that whole element was literally something I actually savored, and it's not always my go-to. So thank you for bringing that out in the characters and making that something that really seemed organic and real.
I'm happy you liked it. And I think it worked with the hope theme that you talked about earlier as well. That, it's one of those things that they actually hope for, right? So it's giving me a little bit of that hope that there might be something more than just friendship. So it's, and I try to keep that. I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's going to be a series. I'm going to have it is a series. I'm going to take my time, sort of savor that hope pretty.
Well, outstanding. I know that that hope, one of the important elements of hope, is being able to find your favorite author and learn more about them. I know there are millions of fans of yours across the globe, and maybe some of them know or don't know how to get a hold of you or how to reach you. And obviously, I'm sure there are millions more fans waiting to find your work. What's the best place, Anders, to get a hold of you or to find you on social media?
Yeah, I'm on social media. I'm the only one with my name, Anders Delamotte. So either Anders Delamotte on Instagram or Facebook. I'm too old for TikTok, and I won't dance. So.
Yeah, I haven't quite mastered the TikTok world. I just don't know that I ever will, but I'm hopeful that maybe one day, maybe someone will, to stay within the theme, give me divine the runestones for me, so that I'll get it.
Yeah. So,
Well,
but Instagram or Facebook, happy. I'm trying to share it as much as I can about writing and well, things around that.
well, thank you so much, Anders, for joining me today. And thank you all for listening in on this episode. I hope to see you all next time on Twisted Passages.